this all starts, like Joe said, on January 31st, 1971. So Carol was a school teacher and she was on vacation. So she decided to drive to the monument for kind of a, 3 or 4 day kind of little camping trip by herself. And so she drives, I believe, through the night. And her first night there, she ends up actually sleeping in her car. But the February 1st and 2nd, she stayed at a campsite near the main visitor center. So it's during this time that she goes on a ranger-sponsored trip to a place called Dripping Springs. So I haven't been in a park. I'm sure they still do them. I've never been on one, but these ranger-sponsored trips are kind of, like the ranger, one or two of the rangers will. It's almost like they hike with you and talk to you about like features of the park and
it's like a guided tour,
kind of like a guided tour, yeah,
for hiking.
Yeah, so they'll take you on like one of the easier kind of day trails that you could do in a few hours, and they'll talk about different stuff. So she spends most of the day walking around with this group, and specifically with the rangers. I guess she spent a lot of time talking with the rangers, and later on in the search, the rangers made the comments that she seemed really smart, was asking a lot of good questions, and that she appeared athletic. So this is really the only comment that we have to, that discusses her physical appearance. So we don't really have anything about any medical conditions, what she looked like. But, one of the rangers did state that she appeared athletic. So we can assume that, she's 32. She's probably in, pretty good shape. If she's going on trips by herself to camp in national parks, I'm going to assume she's pretty fit. So, but like I said, outside of that, we don't have any other details on her physical appearance. So,
yeah, I think we can take liberties as now experts on this topic. I'm going to go out on a limb and say she's an experienced hiker.
Okay.
Based on the schooling she's going to, if the park people are impressed with what she has, I would say I wouldn't go as far as to say she's a good backcountry backpacker,
yep.
But she probably knows what she's doing on day hikes. So she probably is. And she's wearing a windbreaker in the desert. So I think based on that type of stuff, she didn't show up in a tank top and shorts with sandals. She probably has a very, very good advanced understanding of day hiking and was probably well prepared for the situation.
Yeah, and we have to make a lot of assumptions. This is an older case, and I was able to find some research on it. There's a couple archived newspaper reports, but cases like this, we do have to kind of sometimes make some assumptions just based on all the different cases we've looked at and our own experience. So
yeah, I think as long as we preference that, kind of like when you use Reddit information, you give your disclaimer. I think as long as we disclaim that, okay, now this is not official, this is our opinion, or this is our theory, I think we should be good to go. That's my opinion.
Yeah, so even in the timeline here, we're not exactly sure when things happen, but we know in general that they happen. So either the 1st or the 2nd of February, she did her first hike up to Bull Pasture in the, how'd you call it, Joe? The Ajo Mountains?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone that lives in this area, please correct us if we're wrong.
I said AJO at first, and then I realized it's probably Ajo.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So, whatever.
So
I'm sure I'll get corrected and make people upset, and I don't mean to.
So she did her first hike up to Bull Pasture on the 1st or the 2nd. So now fast forward to February 3rd, 1971. So Carol returns to the trailhead and heads up to Bull Pasture again. And this time she had the foresight to leave a note on her car that read, "If I'm not back and if this car is here at 4:30 on February 3rd, then call the Rangers. I'm up at Bull Pastures." So I'm trying to – so I have a couple things going on here, Joe. I think,
okay.
One, I think – that's good practice she's hiking by herself. She leaves a note on her car telling people where she is if she's not back here. If this car is still here, come look for me. Part of me, though, wonders, okay, she hiked up there the first time, didn't leave a note. Now she's hiking up there the second time, and she's leaving a note on her car. What's different the second time where she's worried that there might be a chance she's not back by the end of the day? So just
Yeah, it's not technically an itinerary.
Yeah.
So but I'm gonna call it that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna just call this her itinerary because it's a day hike. She didn't feel the need to leave on the first day, but did the second day. So I'm on board with you with that. That's kind of strange. So let's put a pin in this and then keep going because I don't want to get into the theories before we finish the timeline.
Yeah. Okay. So she's hiking up to Bull Pasture on February 3rd, and she leaves two more notes at trail registers, which this is an interesting thing because I've hiked a lot in the national parks, and I don't think I've ever come across a trail register. I don't know if this is something that they used to do and got rid of them. Have you ever seen a trail register in the parks?
When I was at Kilimanjaro, I had to do a check-in at each camp, but I think that was less of a register and more of part of our permitting.
Yeah.
So I had to sign. They had a note where you could leave notes, so it was cool to read all the people's notes from all over the world that were doing it too.
Okay. Maybe I just missed them.
You had, yeah, you had to do your. Well, like I said, this was like a major destination.
Yeah.
And this is like a national monument. So maybe it could just be something that the rangers like to do there.
Could be.
Because I'm with you on other trails. I haven't really done that. Or maybe I missed it too.
The first register at the trailhead, she left a note that said, "Hi, if you have binocs, look for a white shirt or yellow windbreaker across the way and say hello." So, it's a friendly little message to any other hikers. Now, she left one more note on a register up in Bull Pasture. Now, this one is a little odd, and even some of the research I did, other people have made mention that this is kind of strange. All she wrote was, "I brought beer. Where are you?" So, is she just just being kind of like playful, like, "Oh, hey, I got the beer. Where are you?" Or is she like actually? Did she meet somebody and is communicating with them via these registers, like, "Hey, I've got the beer. Where are you?" So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it way too much.
No, I'm with you. There's something odd about that because that's like a text message,
Right?
And it's 1971.
Yeah.
So okay, keep going.
Okay, so
we're gonna come back to this.
This would be the last time anyone would see Carol or would read anything Carol wrote. So February 3rd, 1971. So on February 4th, 1971, a ranger driving around the parking lot sees the note on her car, and he immediately parks his car and hikes up to Bull Pasture. Doesn't see anyone. He comes back out and calls law enforcement. So she is basically reported missing the following day. We don't have a timeline on the 4th of exactly when, but we can assume, she's been missing 12 to 24 hours at this point, depending on when.
Were there any noted major weather events between the 3rd and the 4th?
I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
One of the park rangers in the search mentions the weather conditions at the time. So
all right. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll be patient.
Okay, good. So there are conflicting reports now on how long the search and rescue operation went. Some things I read said it was 2 weeks. Some said 3 weeks. We're just going to go on the assumption that it kind of kicked off on the 4th of February and it went to the 15th of February, kind of that time frame. So 2 to 3 weeks. So later on that day, law enforcement officials start arriving at the park. The National Park Service calls in Air Force support helicopters. Reports would go on to state that over 300 ground personnel joined the operation and covered up to 120 square miles and combined used up 3,600 hours of search and rescue time. So a massive search and rescue operation, not only in scope, but in also the ground covered. So, 120 square miles is huge.
Yeah, that's a big space to cover.
I mean, this park is only, 520 square miles or whatever you said earlier, Joe. So, I mean, they literally are searching, a fourth of the park.
Yeah.
So that's a huge search area. It's a lot of times it's not that big, but and they had all kinds of, people out there. I read that they had rock climbers and dog teams. And they also noted that the search operation was close to the Mexico border, so they also had the help of U.S. Border Patrol and Customs. So several federal agencies were also involved in the search. And something really interesting, too, her disappearance happened near some tribal areas, so they actually had tribal law enforcement helping in the search. So it's really cool to see. I think from what I read, there were probably 10 or 15 different agencies between the tribal nations, the state, and federal government involved in the search. So a lot of coordination going on.
And she did, and I'm just reiterating, I'm sorry if it's bugging people, but she did this trail the day before the 3rd, right?
She did it. Yeah, she did it on the 1st or the 2nd once. So she had already been up in this area before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm just looking at all trails right now, and they're saying the trail is 3.9 mile lightly trafficked loop. So it's a loop. So you basically can go one way the entire time and end up back where you started.
Yeah.
People are rating it as moderate, so not hard, not easy. And it would take, just a few hours to do.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be something that our group would do, like the end of a trip when we've got maybe 4 hours to burn.
Sure.
Before we have to leave.
I'll real quick. I'll just mention what this is. So All Trails, if you're not a hiker, it's an app and a website where people. It's kind of like how Waze, you can the roadmap, like you can report potholes and things in the road. On All Trails, people can record their time and trails, and then they rate what it's like, and people update it for weather conditions and stuff. So you can get a lot of information if you're ever listening to our show in a national park and want to check out some of the trails that we're talking about. This is like the best resource for people talking about how hard it is, the weather, all that type of stuff. So,
and
sorry for the deviation.
Well, no, and I'll also say, and I'll apologize to the listeners. I've made these comments several times. I will get around to updating our show notes, and we will include stuff like All Trails in our show notes so that if you're listening, you can kind of follow through and see some of the stuff we're talking about. Just Joe and I are pretty busy these days. So. But getting back to the search for Carol, this is where things started getting a little strange, and this was part of the reason why I was interested in this case. Before what I'm about to talk about, this is kind of one of your, I hate to say it, I'm not making light of her disappearance, but, a disappearance like hers is pretty common in national parks. People go hiking by themselves and they get lost, hurt, and aren't found. But what happens next with some of the rangers in the search is kind of it's strange to me. So during this search between the 4th and the 15th, one of the rangers going up to that canyon tells his buddy that he smelled decaying flesh. That bothered a lot of people because it was early in the search from the time Carol disappeared for her body to start decaying to that level where they would expect that kind of decay to happen much later on in a search, and they find it odd because it's strong enough smell that these guys are smelling it from the trail. So,
yeah, and those people are used to, like, I would say, the normal environmental smells of that area.
Yep.
So the fact that he brought it up and thought it was strange, I'd say, is a very, very legitimate.
Yeah, and I mean,
claim.
I've even, I've come across, animal carcasses while hiking, and I'm well aware of the distinct smell of, like a rotting animal carcass, and you can tell some of these have been here for weeks. And they've been, gnawed on by other animals, and it's a very distinct smell. It's not a smell that these guys like mistook for something else. I mean, I fully believe that they smelled rotting flesh. So, like we said, that disturbed the rangers because of how, fresh the search was. So the rangers get back and report this information. So now they send multiple teams into Bull Pasture area trying to get that same smell and to try and figure out where it came from. They also brought multiple dog teams with them. So we're not saying days later. We're probably a matter of hours later. And all the multiple teams and the dogs got nothing. No scent was found. No, they couldn't smell anything.
So just not because I'm going to end up playing devil's advocate later. So we now have one guy who smelled this and reported it, and did other people also witness it with him at the time?
Well, I will. I'll get into that.
Okay. All right.
So like I said, there multiple teams went in there and they trying to get that same smell. They didn't get anything. And according to the Pima County Police Report, which was included in the National Park Service report, they went into the area called the Ajos. It's a southwest-facing mountain up on Bull Pasture. And in this area, some of the other rangers several days later experienced the same odor. So now we have
okay.
multiple rangers that have experienced this smell, and it actually made it into the official police report. So I think that makes it much more credible that it was written into the report. It wasn't just some kind of like one guy, like, oh, Bob always smells weird stuff. Like, so going on, a ranger named Royals wrote a report that they had searched her car, and the only thing they could determine that was missing after speaking with her mom was her hiking boots and her canteen. This may have indicated that she had only planned on doing a day hike. So based on what you were saying, Joe, about this trail, I think it's very likely that she only intended to do a day hike here. She took her boots and a canteen and, started hiking. Now, one thing I will say is, if I'm hiking in the desert, I'm taking more than a canteen of water with me, even if it's a 4-mile hike. I know this is February, so it's cooler in that park at this time, but you're still in the desert. I would bring a couple liters of water with me, but that's just me. So going on, we got some more reports to read from Pima County and then a couple quotes. So in the Pima County report, which was written by one of the rangers, it read, "One additional clue was turned up on Monday, February 15th at 2 limited locations about 400 yards apart on the southwest-facing side of the Ajos. A very strong and distinct human odor was found, but at no other locations. Supervisory Ranger Hal Koss of the Saguaro and one of the other searchers who were recently involved in the recovery of a body had a very strong and positive feelings on the identification of the odor." So he also continues to write, "The following day, Ranger Koss, after flying the area in a Border Patrol plane, led an 8-man search party back over this area. Again, the odor was observed in the same location, but only occasionally and not as distinct. Other members of the team described it as very weird and scary. Described the area as very weird and scary. All efforts were negative, and search activities have been reduced to intermittent patrols and as time permits." So, pretty strange. I think these smells of, decaying flesh are very odd.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the part where they say the two guys that have done recovery already that would be able to identify the smell.
Yep.
Pegged it as that. So that's like less of someone saying, "Hey, it smells like rotting flesh," more like, "Hey, I know exactly what the smell is."
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also, I find this, the part where they mention that the area seemed weird and scary, coming from park rangers who probably have been in this area before, know that, the park. I find that odd. You don't usually hear park rangers describing areas of their park as scary. I couldn't find any other information or context on why they called it weird and scary. If it was, they call it weird and scary, like it's like gnarly, like it's tough hiking, or like were they actually fearful of their life while they were up there? So don't know, but that just adds kind of to the mystery. So we've got a couple quotes here from some of the people involved in the search. Lieutenant Oglesby, who was one of the guys on the search, was quoted as saying, "Everybody, the monument people, our people, the Border Patrol, the cells, law and order, has worn themselves to the nub looking for this woman. They're all experienced, and they've gone over the whole place with a fine-tooth comb. None of them see how she could have been missing if she's in there." So he, and we've seen this from other stories, like he's convinced that they covered every square inch of this area, and she should be in there. At least her body should be there. So someone else mentioned that this was the largest search operation to date in the monument, and I believe it still is. And according to Rod Boyles, the chief ranger for Organ Pipe, what may have happened is she wandered away from the basin of Bull Pasture and somehow injured herself. Perhaps she slipped and fell off a cliff. February 3rd was a cold, blustery day, and to get out of bad weather, she crawled into one of the hundreds of tiny caves that line the cliffs. Dense brush grew right up against the cave entrance, and there she died. The brush has hidden the grave from our searchers, so we haven't found her. So that's a devil's advocate, saying that nothing weird happened here. She just succumbed to the elements. I think before we get into theories and what you think, Joe, my final thoughts just on this one are, was Carol planning to meet someone based on her comment about bringing beer? Why are experienced rangers making the comments about the area being scary, especially if they've been through, that area dozens of times before? The fact that this was 1971, it's 2021, so much time has passed and so many thousands of people have probably gone through that area, yet no signs of Carol have been found yet. I think that's an interesting aspect to maybe she's not in the park. And which leads me to my final point. With it being so close to the Mexican border, could there be some type of criminal aspect to this disappearance? Lot to chew on there.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? I think the official theory based on the chief ranger is that she injured herself somehow and succumbed to the elements.